I have a friend that's very big and is watching. That being said, I was very surprised at how level-headed and objective the guy was. Made it clear to me that this group had actually gathered a lot of very interesting evidence. He also explained that the Bigfoot community was full of fraudsters and they were the cause of the most ridicule associated with the subject. So he refers me to a few documentaries to watch, and after a few beers and some more research, I was hooked. I phoned him the next day and asked him when they were going squatching next. I was delighted when he informed me that I was welcome to join them that weekend, and he gave me a list of camping gear I would need. Now, likely, as anybody else would, I love the camping hunt. I was just out for a good time. I wasn't taking this too seriously. Did I expect to see a Bigfoot? No, not really. Did I see a Bigfoot? No. But did we have a very good, interesting time and some unexpected experiences that I have difficulty explaining? Yes. The first was when my friend tried some wood knocking. This apparently was a way that the Bigfoot, should I call them big feet, communicate. It simply consists of knocking a bat or a board against the tree. So he walks up to a nice tall oak, takes a board, and proceeds to start whacking the shit out of it rhythmically. At this point, he looks like a total jackass, and I'm starting to feel like a jackass just watching him. Then he pauses, and I hear it. Whack, 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 off in the distance, the same as he did. I almost shot a cinder block. Someone or something was responding to him. The fucking squatchers all just smile and said, "It's good, sounds like they're still in the area." Good. Bigfoot being less than a mile away from you is good. I had not believed in Bigfoot at any level until this point. But the forest was starting to look a lot creepier now than it sort of did before. I thought about the prospect of an 8-foot-tall, hairy North American would a carrying me off into the trees for some sweet monkey love and cringe. According to my new buddy, who I'm starting to doubt the sanity of, Bigfoot is mostly harmless. They have been attacks, he says, but mostly they give you a lot of warning, would rather not be seen. I asked him how they warn people, and he says, "You'll see, we're going to get him nice and round up tonight." Oh great, I'm literally messing with Sasquatch, except there's no beef jerky, it's cold as fuck, and I'm armed with nothing but a machete. I'm actually starting to get a little scared. I was already prairie dogging from the wood knocking exchange, and now I knew that something was just beginning. So the night goes on happily enough. Someone brought some ballpark franks, and we cooked on the campfire. Kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya, etc. Shit got real at around 1 a.m. My friend tells me more of the ways to antagonize Bigfoot. He said one of those ways is to play recorded tapes of pigs being slaughtered at the ridiculous volume. Hey, if it worked on Mick Jagger, why not Sasquatch? So, he goes on ahead and starts blasting the most blood-curdling shit I've ever heard out of a megaphone. If you played this shit while I was trying to sleep, I certainly wouldn't like you. And to my utter amazement, first, one, then two, and then a lot of rocks started pelting us from the tree line. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's just rocks. Don't be such a pussy. These were big fucking rocks. And I was even more scared when I realized that whoever was throwing these rocks had been standing at the tree line watching us. So under a hail of throwing rocks, we pick up our gear and move camp quickly. My friend informs me that we are completely safe, and I promptly disagree. I felt safer in Somalia. At least, there I had a gun and semi-sane people to get my back. He goes on to inform me now that we have moved camp out of their territory, they will likely disperse. But I guess he knew his stuff because the rest of the night was pretty uneventful. I didn't sleep for obvious reasons. Now, did I see Bigfoot? No. I tried to look into the trees. I even put my flashlight on a tree line. This caused me to become more of a target for the rocks being thrown and couldn't make out anything but dark shapes. They did look big, but nonetheless, they could have been pranksters. So I didn't have an encounter with North America's wood ape, and maybe I just had some kind of encounter with pranksters. But nonetheless, I won't be squashing anytime soon, because those events alone were enough to creep me right the hell out. This happened to my friend who was working as a police officer at the time. We shall call my friend Tom. Anyways, Tom had just begun working as an officer, and as a result, he got stuck with lousy shifts. Tom worked in neighborhood where just about nothing bad ever happened. But working graveyard shifts at parks in the area can still be pretty creepy. Usually, he would just find a couple stoners hanging out on a swing set. This one night, Tom had a shift at a local park he didn't often go to. It's about 2 a.m., and his only job is to make sure no one is around and all is well. As he's walking around the outskirts of the woods, he sees one man just standing with his back facing towards him, on the edge of the darkness of the woods. He yelled to the man, "Hey you, what are you doing? Come on over here right now." The man turned and smiled at him. Then he dashed into the woods without really thinking. Tom sprinted after him. The guy was booking it, leaping over bushes and ducking under fallen trees like a pro. Tom is an extremely athletic guy, but this man was on a different level. As Tom finally catches the guy, he again yells to him. The man smiles once again, then books it once again. Tom kept after him, but was a good ways away from him, about 10 to 15 feet behind. This guy finally reached the clearing in the woods. Tom's adrenaline running low, and it's taking all his power to keep screaming for the guy to stop. The guy turns and smiles once more. The guy books it over the hill, seemingly to a steep slower this time. Tom draws his gun and powers up the hill. The guy was gone, according to Tom. He just literally disappeared. There was no way he could have escaped normally. To this day, Tom accounts as an account was something very sinister. The only thing he could find in the woods was a makeshift rundown campsite that looked like it hadn't been inhabited in years. I work the graveyard shift at work, and when I come home, my wife leaves for work. I'm typically exhausted and mildly sleep-deprived. My adventure happened mid-morning before my synchronized nap time. I also only get 3 to 4 hours of actual sleep in the evening before my shift. I believe this detail can help this community help come to a conclusion. I'm also going to make a separate post with photos of the trail, a picture of my son and I with the wagon, the map of the trail, and an approximate area where the anomaly was observed. I'm an Armed Forces veteran, USA. On the East Coast, my son is only 2 years old, and this event happened about 1 week ago. Every now and then, I like to take my son out on walks around the neighborhood and his wagon. We would typically travel to one of the nearby playground so that he can blow off some energy before his afternoon nap. I live in a decent area that has a newly developed houses and townhomes, and the housing development is still expanding greatly. This particular day was beautiful. Lightly cloudy, somewhat hot, but with a frequent cool down due to passing clouds. I thought that today would be a great day to take my son out for a stroll and head over to a newly made playground that I saw on the way home one day. So we set off, packed with a couple of water bottles and a snack just in case. As we were doing a brief tour around the neighborhood, I noticed the state-sponsored and well-maintained a trail entrance that I'd never noticed while driving around here. I decided, screw it. It's a pretty nice day. My son likes nature. He won't mind. So off we went on this very distinctive clear trail with mile markers every quarter mile and yellow markers on trees every 100 feet or so to let you know that you were on the correct path. Everything was going well for the first mile and a quarter. We were fairly deep in the woods, but certainly no more than a quarter mile from the developments at any given time. We came across the bridge, I went over a small trench, and proceeded for about another half mile after that. Then things slowly started to seem off. The clear yellow markers that were put on the tree started disappearing, probably due to vandalism, because the nail was still there, but the marker itself was completely gone. I didn't mind much, because the path was still definitive, deliberate, and well-maintained. But then I heard a loud snapping sound that sounded like it was roughly 50 to 75 feet back. I immediately halted the wagon and looked back to see what it was. This is where things got surreal. As I looked back, I noticed that the trail I was walking on lost all sense of familiarity. There were trees I didn't see, certain plants I know for sure went through before stuff like that. But regardless, I kept my composure and stared deeply into the woods to see what made that snapping sound. I scanned the area and didn't see any life forms, but for some reason, my eyes started to fixate on a particularly unnerving dark section of the forest. For whatever reason, my body started locking up, and every single alarm bell on my head was pinging. No matter how hard I tried to focus on this dark patch, I couldn't see anything. I had the weirdest sensation of being able to see each individual branch and plants in high detail, but I couldn't focus on the scene overall. It was super blurry. I also felt my internal fight-or-flight mechanism flipping between the two decisions faster than a coin and a coin toss. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, trying to figure out why my senses were not working anymore. This instinctual part of my brain was screaming that there was something there, but I absolutely could not observe it. Whatever little light was in that area seemed to bend around this one central point, somewhat like how a cloaking device works. It was a minor distortion, but enough to make it strangely obvious. I didn't notice how I hadn't heard a peep from the forest this entire time, and I was feeling very cold, even during an 85+ degree weather. I cannot shake this feeling of impending doom, probably what one feels when they're on the verge of death. I felt exceptionally vulnerable because I was not armed and had no way of dealing with whatever the hell this was. Eventually, I was able to snap out of my trance briefly to look down at my son and saw that his body was contorted around his seat, frozen, and staring exactly where the anomaly was, with his mouth agape and his eyes wide and dilated. This is when I knew I wasn't hallucinating and that we needed to get the hell out of there. I took advantage of my brief moan of clarity and ran like the wind with my son in tow. I looked back only once and saw that my boy was still looking towards the area, but not frozen in place anymore. It took all about a couple minutes to get out past the tree line onto a main road. For whatever reason, I broke down and started crying. My son looked at me like I was crazy. I never felt such sheer terror over what seemed like nothing in my whole life. I hadn't felt that way at all at any point in my life, in fact. The feeling that my son and I are completely vulnerable and that I wouldn't have been able to defend either of us. I also never had that distinct feeling of being able to see things perfectly, yet not able to register any of it in my head. My morbid curiosity wants me to revisit the place, equipped with a firearm and a GoPro to record any events that would arise, but I'm still trying to get over the previous experience from now. I've been in crazy situations before, but this trumps anything I have ever experienced. Many years ago, at Wongai Campgrounds in Queensland, Australia, my father, my friend, and I were out camping for a couple of days. Usually it's packed, but we went during the week and got 2 days off school. I can't remember the reason. I think it was just because my dad had a few days off, but that's beside the point. Due to it being midweek, the grounds were empty. We've been here many times before, but never alone. However, we were excited due to having the whole grounds to ourselves, which is pretty cool. Now, we were no strangers to the Australian bush. We know what to look out for, we know how to play it safe, so at night, knowing no one was around to mess with our camp, we decided to go for a mini bushwalk to walk to the other side of the river that runs along the grounds. When I say grounds, it's just a clearing in the middle of a bush, not a properly established grounds, far away from all the roads. We got to the campsite on the opposite side of the river, and, looking out the river, we can see a bright light just near our campgrounds. Thinking it could be the fire, we thought we put it out by that time, but we weren't sure, so we walked back through the bush to go to our site, still able to see the large lightning. However, we were going to our side, and we realized that it was not a fire. As we were able to come closer to the river this time, we saw that the light was over the river, not in it, but over it. We were somewhat scared, but thought there was some explanation for it, maybe a torch or something along those lines. But looking for wherever we were, there was nothing under it. The light was a good 70 centimeters above the water, and still, dead still. The light itself was flickering, sort of like a fire, but it was in no way attached to anything, just a large, between a tennis ball and soccer ball size, ball, floating, giving off a strong fire-like light, but more like a light bulb center. This went on for maybe 30 minutes as we tried splashing the water and trying to figure out what it was, but it didn't move and didn't do anything. It just floated in that one spot, in complete silence, unlike the sound of fire would make. My dad decided to get a torch in his camera, and of course, being the scared 12-year-olds we were, we went with them. As soon as we go to the camp, which was only maybe 100 meters away, the light was gone. We ran back with a torch, and nothing was there. No one there and no other campers, just gone. We didn't really talk about it because we didn't really know what it was, how, or why. Lights are something that's very popular in the Australian outback, and that's the only explanation that I can think for. But they have no explanation. I'm a 16-year-old male, and I've got a pretty interesting predicament. So around a year back, I'm camping with my Boy Scout True. We were going to this thing called the Voyager Outpost, which is a one-night camp. During the camp we are already at, we leave main camp and canoe 2 miles to the backside, where they dump us on an island, give us food to cook, and leave. We also have to build our own shelter. Seeing as it was July, the weather was amazing. Me and my buddies all had our shelters between 3 trees. Our shelters were hammocked with rope over the top, on which reflective blankets would hang draped, super comfy. Anyways, around 2 a.m., we heard a noise. It was more like a grunting. This quickly got louder until it was a deafening and loud growl. It was kind of like a black bear. But black bears don't live in our woods. No bears do, actually. We were on an island. The next morning, my 2 friends and I wake up. How we slept once walked away, I'm not sure. Around 6 a.m. We all have the exact same story, at the exact same time frame. We were all wearing watches, so we could easily tell what time it was. Seeing as how was the exact same story, in the exact same time, and it was only us on the island, which was 100 square feet if that, we figured it must be somewhere in the surrounding woods. We looked around the island first, only to find an owl feather next to a hawk feather. Owls are messengers of death, and when reached by Wix Doctor, Inuit, I believe up north near Canada, I was told I was a hawk. At this point, I'm kind of creeped out. We looked in the water, and there was nothing. No prints, and nothing that looked out of the ordinary. We were surrounded by dense brush on the perimeter of the island, so would have had to step over the brush if it had feet, making its initial print in the sandy pretty deep. But there was nothing. We get in our canoes and paddle around the island looking for something, anything, or we just couldn't find anything. Flash forward to yesterday, and I'm camping, just a weekender. I go by the stream to relax and stuff. There's a dead hawk. Fresh, no marks, no bullets, no holes, just dead. Last night, an owl flew over my tent as I walked out to take a pee. I decided to hold it. Does anyone have a possible answer as to what's going on? I was on a field trip to our local park. Our teacher decided to let us go on one of the trails. This trail had a larger trail and had a smaller trail inside it. The smaller trail had a slimy, stinky pond inside of it. The small trail was on a circular area surrounding the pond, but the pond had an area that went under a little bridge walkway. On one side of the bridge was the pond. On the other side was a flowing tiny creek. My friend and I decided just to take the small trail and stop at the bridge and wait, and then go back to the bus, because we didn't really feel like walking that day. So, that is what we did. I remember it being shaded by the trees, except for the little bridge. So my friend laid down on the bridge in the only sunny spot, facing the larger trail. You can see the smaller trail from the larger trail. I thought I saw a crawdad. I love those things, and decided I was going to go into the little creek and grab it. I remember thinking that it was convenient that there were stone steps down into the creek. I walked down them and thought nothing of it. I remember standing in the creek and looking down in it. I remember saying to my friend along the lines of something that doesn't look right in this creek. Look at it. It just seems to go on for a long time, but it shouldn't. I mean, it should end at the parking lot, but the parking lot was in front of the trail right outside the tree line. I remember nothing else, nothing. At some point, my shoe was untied, and I stooped down to tie it, and my stomach growled. I said to my friend, "We need to get back." I stepped at the rocks, the creek, and onto the bridge. My friend said, "Yeah, I remember me being afraid." I was like, "It was feeling spooky here. It seems so late. Let's go and hurry." She agreed. We got up and we ran towards the entrance. Our teacher, our classmates, and our buses were gone. But the cops, the firemen, and the principal, and our parents were all there. They were getting ready to drag the pond. We have been gone for around 4 hours. Numerous people walked both trails and walked over that little bridge. They said they were mad because they said we could not have been where we said we were. And they were mad because they thought we were hiding and not coming when they screamed our names. But we weren't lying. My friends and I became distant. We've never talked about it since, not even once. My friends and I decided to head up to a remote part of the Chattahoochee National Forest to spend our Friday night and Saturday out camping. I have been camping before, but this was going to be the first time doing it deep in the woods, with basically no humans, within a 5 to 10 mile radius, and no cell service. We set up our camp near an old logging path. Once we got settled in the camp, we made some dinner, and shortly after, we're getting cleaned up because it was completely dark, and out in the woods it was the darkest I've ever seen. As the fire started to burn out, we decided to call it a night and head to our tent. At this point, I was already having trouble sleeping. If you've ever experienced the quietness of the woods, you know it's so quiet that it's loud. Every twig snapping and rustling in the leaves had freaked me out. I fell asleep finally after about an hour. I woke up in the late night to the sound of a very large truck and a dog barking like crazy. My friend's tent was right in front of mine, so I immediately hear him whisper to me, "Wake up! Now!" I can hear the sound of a shotgun pumping as I'm grabbing the machete I have in my tent. The truck is now driving directly next to our camp, and this dog is going nuts. He stops, gets out, and starts screaming incomprehensible shit. It sounded like somebody yelling at a concert, but with no music playing. Then he takes a piss on the tree and starts laughing hysterically. After what felt like an hour, this guy gets back in his truck and speeds off. We both think it may have been some guy that comes out here to do drugs or other types of illegal shit. But to me, it sounded like someone who was completely mentally insane. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. And I hope I never meet that mentally insane mountain man ever again. When I was 15, my brother, 2 of our cousins, and I used to spend a week up north with my grandparents on a piece of land in Wisconsin that they bought. To set the scene, the land was about 5 acres in a rural part of the state, and the neighbors around us were summer people who only came up on weekends, meaning midweek was pretty desolate. My grandparents had 2 RV trailers on their land, one for their use and one for guest use. At 15, my parents decided to let my cousin, 13, and I use the guest RV just because they thought we were old enough to be by ourselves. They kept my brother, 11, and my younger cousin, 10, in their trailer. I had just returned from a week in Washington, D.C. with friends, so most of our nighttime rituals included gossiping about D.C. and the boy I had a crush on, who was there as well. Nothing concerning happened for the first few nights. As a precaution, my grandparents gave us a car key and an intercom just in case we got scared. Oh boy. How didn't I know that this would be used in one of our last nights there? It was around 10 p.m., and my grandparents and the others had gone to sleep, so we walked over to the other trailer. As we got in the trailer, we started to change when something in my head popped up. We hadn't locked the door. The voice in my head urged me to lock it. We had admittedly been bad about this. I went back and locked it. My cousin and I went back to talking at the table. As my cousin talked about the boy she liked, I got this feeling of dread. I noticed that I stopped listening to her, and after a minute, she did too. She asked me what was wrong, and I shushed her. Outside the window next to us, the shades were closed. We heard a shuffling noise, as if someone was walking back and forth in front of the window. This went on for a solid 5 minutes. The noise approached the door, and I immediately hit the intercom button, calling my grandpa. I told him that there were weird noises outside. Whoever was outside could most likely there be hearing us talk because of the thin walls. We could still hear the shuffling. My grandpa's voice rang out of the intercom. "I'm grabbing my gun. I'll be right there." At that second, the shuffling stopped. I hear my grandpa rip open the door of his trailer, and he yelled out. He ran to our door and knocked, telling me it was him. I opened the door, and to this day I've never seen the look of a crazy and terrified as my grandpa's face. He was holding his gun, and he asked us to follow him to his camper. We obliged and grabbed the stuff we needed. My brother and cousin and grandma were sitting up in the camper. My grandma looked terrified. She sat in the window staring out past us. We settled in and slept. But she sat there awake all night. The next day, we left 2 days early for home. My grandparents, to this day, tell us it was probably an animal and shush us up about the story. I'm 22, so it's been a while. I know it was a person, so does my cousin. But if I could go back, I would have ripped open those blinds so I could have made sure and not have to live with the wonder of who was on the other side.